In a very simple way, video animation involves all the pieces of branding. What are all the pieces we're going to need and how do they fit together? And the easiest way I've found to get it all together is a video or animation.
Lost in space, but that's okay. Climb aboard the Brand Spaceship today.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Sheffer. This is the Brand Spaceship. Today we're talking about, you're right, I made this up, the inverse brand theory. So let's just dive into what this is about. When you start a company, you start a brand, or you're rebranding, or whatever you're doing with your brand, you usually start with copy. From copy, you go to visuals. When I say visuals, I mean like 2D UI design, designing your website. And then from there, and often way down the road, you get to video. Before I dive into this, let me just say, and I often give these prefaces, we are very biased to video. That is what we do primarily. However, in the process of becoming a partner of early stage companies pretty often, usually they'll start to say, I know you do video, but what about animation? It's like, yes, of course we do animation. What about design? Yes, we do design. What about, can we just bring you in and will you give us your ideas? So it's spread into the branding phase. Now, we, like I said, know video best. So we always start with video, but I'm going to explain to you why I think that might be a really useful thing for your brand. We're going to take a hypothetical company. We're going to say this is a B2B SaaS company looking to brand, and I'm going to talk you through 4 basic steps of how we'd make a video, and then talk about why those are useful as a starting point versus something that comes much later. When you start to make a video, one of the first things you do is you have to come up with some beats to a story. The beats to a story are very, very similar to the basics of the pitch you're going to make for your company. So we start out with some sort of character. This character has a need. That need is solved with your product, right? The basics of storytelling lead to all the other pieces of your brand that you're going to need. Your copy is generally based around a person who has a need. The need is fulfilled by your product. From there, video requires visualization. You're going to ask yourself, if you want to make your software more human, I'm going to say we need to hire some actors. We need to have live action. We want to show people using your product. We want to show smiles on the faces of people who use your product because it has solved that really important need. If you're trying to do something really complex, often we can't film that. Right? You're talking about bank transactions, right? It's going to be a lot easier for us to do that with some 2D design and animation than me going and shooting in 20 different banks all over the world and getting, people involved. Those are usually our 2 main question marks. That's element 2. What are the visuals? That also influences things like your website, like your pitch deck. If you want your story to be more human, you're probably using photography.
This is looking really good.
If you want to create a brand that is telling a complex story simply, often that's going to be some sort of 2D design, maybe 3D design, but we're in the world of animation for your video and 2D design, 3D design for your website, pitch deck, sales information, etc. All right, so that's step 2. Step 3, what types of scenes and scenarios do you need for this? Whether we're talking live action or we're talking animation, once you decide the types of scenes that our character is going to have, that is going to influence everything else yet again. If we're in the world of animation, are we animating characters? Are we animating graphs? Are we animating statistics? Whatever we're having to animate for the video, we're also going to probably use on the website. We're also going to use in the sales materials. If instead we're shooting a live action commercial where people are using your product, well, here's something great. If we go and film scenes, that becomes product photography. That becomes photography for your sales deck, photography for your social post, photography for your website. This also goes back to the thing we always talk about, which is an asset library. If you do the reverse, which is what most people do, I call this inverse brand theory, reverse brand theory, whatever we want to say. But if we start with the images, almost always, people just use stock. And stock we can't control. Let's say this is more of a consumer company. This is, an app. You're on the app. We know we need people using the phone. We know we need UI of the phone showing your app being used. Well, stock footage is going to look probably like every other company. If you know you're going to spend money to go shoot something, why don't we just shoot with the perspective of the asset library? In this case, we're talking about an asset library that isn't only for video creation, animation creation, but is actually to service other things. So you're this consumer company. We go and we film a commercial that involves people using your product on a phone. From there, we're going to extract screen grabs if we shoot at high enough resolution. Now, some people in the comments might be like, don't do that. You need to shoot photography. That's fine too. But there are ways in which we literally can take screen grabs from the video and utilize it elsewhere. This will create cohesion across all the different elements of your brand. The last thing every video needs is some sort of hook, some sort of pitch at the end, which by the way is exactly what your company needs anyway. And a lot of times what happens is if we start the way most people start, with a copywriter coming up with a concept for the pitch, right? So let's talk about this B2B SaaS company that's transacting money. Get your money faster with Transacticon, whatever it is, right? They're like, oh, I love this pitch. They have it on their website. They got it on their sales deck. And then all of a sudden they hire a voiceover actor. The actor says, get your money faster with Transacticon. And they're like, that sounds stupid, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a transformer.
It does. Transacticon, they liked their pitch on their website in their sales deck. Then they heard someone say it and they didn't like it. Again, if we go through the process of consuming a story, creating a story together, if we start with the video, we start with the animation, we start with the storytelling, we can back into everything from the pitch you make to future investors, the website you're going to create, all the copy for sales. And throughout the process of reviewing concepts and scripts, etc., you're going to learn a lot about yourself that you couldn't learn the other way. If instead we do it the traditional way, where you just talk to the copywriter has one perspective. They're not thinking about how to visualize it. If you just talk to a logo designer, I would even go as far as saying you might want to animate your logo before you draw it.
What you're saying is let's start with the story, and then from there we can pull elements that make up the tagline, make up the logo, make up all of these things, rather than, cool, now let's tell a very human story with this Transacticon robot logo that we made, trying to humanize it or give it to a customer in a digestible way.
In a very simple way, video animation involves all the pieces of branding. It involves the storytelling. It involves the visualization. It involves audio. It involves text. It involves graphics. It involves photography. So all the pieces that you're going to make, you have to make the visual storytelling, the video or the animation. So what we're saying is it will take longer than a traditional video project, but here's the other part of it. And this is how we can kind of wrap this all up. It's like people who do the strategy part of branding, a lot of times it's like 40 grand just to talk to them. Part of me, when I hear that, is like, oh, I should get into that business. But it's like, I would be so dissatisfied if at the end of an engagement with a brand, especially a young brand, the end result of what they had was my ideas and not something they could share with people. And even if I just create one thing they can share with people, my personal reaction is that's not enough. I am always pointing, my lady is always pointing. We talk on the show all the time about this concept of the asset library. How does the content that we're discussing creating and that we create service a much broader idea, which is every bit of the way your brand is represented to the world, whether it's audio, it's text, it's the way you speak about it, it's the visuals you show on social media, it's your TV commercial. All of these things are what equal out to your brand. A really common thing, especially on YouTube, will be like brand people being like, what is a brand? And they have all these like complicated definitions of it. It's just, to me, it's all the shit you show people, right? Like you could say,
Yeah.
it's my feeling I get when I think of your brand. And it's like, well, that's generated by a bunch of crap you created. But it all is influenced by some sort of beginning of a story. And the question is, how quickly do you get to that story? And to me, I know we're biased. We start with video, right? We are a video production company at the basis, but I've worked in the branding front. I've worked as a designer. And I find if we start with what are all the pieces we're going to need and how do they fit together? What is that library of content and information and messaging? And let's see it together. And the easiest way I've found to get it all together is a video or animation.
Is there an example of a brand where inverse brand theory would not work?
Well, I think it only works if you're starting out or completely rebranding. Right. So
from the beginning, like is there a brand that you can think of, like, let's go all the way back to its inception. If they would have started with inverse brand theory, it would not have worked out for them.
I think it works for every brand. However, lots of brands have strength in one element that grows into strength into other elements. I'll give you an example. And I don't know how Nike started. That Nike swoosh, I know enough to know that the story is it was like $5 or something like that. And I'm sure at the time, like, what the hell is this thing? It looks like a check mark. Who cares? Whatever it is. Somehow, the piece by piece progression allowed for the creation of something that as a whole was just amazing. And it could be that everything I just said about this inverse brand theory is wrong, and that actually building piece by piece is the proper way so that you are able to look at one piece and say, maybe I should do this. However, to me, that sounds very time consuming. And if your goal is to get to a more fulfilled brand more quickly, I believe the inverse brand theory at the beginning, whatever your product is, will always be a better solution than just going piece by piece by piece. I could be completely wrong. And if people start implementing the inverse brand theory, it could be found out that yes, it goes fast, but it's always worse. Does that make sense?
This leads directly to the next question, which is like, how would the Nike brand unfold using inverse brand theory?
From the beginning, it's like, okay, these are the best running shoes of all time. Who needs the best running shoes? It's like, oh, people who are running marathons need the best running shoes. People who are at the 18th mile of a marathon and they're collapsing. And it's like, what is that? All of a sudden you'll go and you'll capture that moment and you'll capture it for real. Like you'll be like, let's go film. You can't predict what you'd get, but in my mind, you get this person, hands on their knees, they're sweating, it's dripping, the sweat drips on the shoe, and you're like, that's it. Do you see what I mean? Again, we're going in the reverse. I have no idea, and obviously Nike is top 5 best brands in the world.
Yeah.
So we're speaking out of turn, but I am saying that, like, if you figure out that concept that you just expressed, at the moment I want to give up, I need something to help me not give up. If you figure out that that's one of the most valuable emotional reactions possible, doesn't even matter what that swoosh looks like. Can it be fucking anything? As long as it doesn't look like anything else. Because I would say no one ever talks about Apple's logo.
Some kind of fruit company?
They're not like, you know what's the best logo? It's that apple with the bite out of it.
I think it's a great logo.
It's a logo.
But you don't think about it. You're right. Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks for watching the Brand Spaceship. We just broke down why you should probably brand your company in the exact opposite way everyone tells you to. We also talked about the fact that might be a bad idea. If you fast forwarded to the end, let's go back and watch the whole thing and decide for yourself whether or not I'm an idiot or a genius. We don't know. We'll never know unless you try. So, thank you. Peace.
Don't forget to watch the next episode.
It's going to be fantastic.
Blow your little human mind.
The next episode, I might get home from space.